Hey everybody, welcome to another Making a Geek. I am Damien DeCarlo. Here with me, I have the wonderfully talented, at always being her, Avatal Stone is here.
Hi there.
And also joining me today are the returning guests from Fanbase Press, Barbara and Bryant Dillon. Welcome everybody.
Hello, thanks
How's it
for having
going?
us. Hello.
I'm so happy we're together again. We're going to talk about Star Wars, and we are on to Star Wars Episode 2. And this one is a very interesting movie because looking back, I think very differently of it now than I did when it first came out. Then I thought differently of it midway through, maybe 10 years after that. But then now I have a completely different opinion going back to it.
Well, funny enough, Bryant and I feel like have rewatched this movie a number of times within the past two
Yeah.
years, I would say. Leading up to the launch of Rise of Skywalker, we did multiple watch throughs of the entire Star Wars saga. So we've definitely had our hand at rewatching it and kind of seeing it through new eyes. I will fully admit that, like you, Damien, when I first saw Attack of the Clones, I very sadly to Bryant said, I think that's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
Not even just the worst Star Wars, just the worst.
No, the worst movie
It
ever.
was the worst.
We walked
I
out,
very excitedly took her to see this film, and
we walked out of the theater, and that's the first thing I said to him.
that was
so
yeah.
He was very sad.
Oh well.
I have come to appreciate the good things of Attack of the Clones. It's definitely not my least favorite Star Wars movie ever, but I definitely see the flaws, and I think it's a kind of yin and yang thing, that I can see the flaws, but I can see why it's necessary. I can see what the benefits of the movie are and the good points of the movie. So it's become something that I can watch and find enjoyable moments or aspects of it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same, I guess. I did really enjoy it the first time that I saw it in theaters. I think I was so excited to see things that I waited for so long to see on screen. The idea, like the arena scene with multiple Jedi fighting. I was really attached to, I think maybe I was primed to be attached to the Anakin and Padme characters. I was born in 1982. Hayden Christensen was born in 1981. So we were essentially the same age. I was in acting college at the time, doing a lot of stage work. And I had been raised on stories of individuals who are members of the Royal Shakespeare Company, in between their plays, sneaking out for screenings of the 1977 Star Wars or the 1980 Empire, and what an interesting mix it was to have Shakespeare and Star Wars together. And so I think I not only idolized the idea of the role of Anakin Skywalker and that story, but also Barbara and I were romantically involved in college, continue to be, but that was the beginning.
The timing. Okay.
Yes.
It's about the timing.
And Barbara there was all these little things that as a young, starstruck individual, I guess, wearing my heart on my sleeve, played into it. Barbara was a political major. We had to keep our relationship, quote unquote, secret for undisclosed at this point reasons. But so there was like this secret romance going on where Barbara and I were like, catching stealing a kiss here in a corner there, like in the library here. And so I think it all played into me relating or connecting really, really closely to these characters and very easily forgiving, plot holes and things like that, rough acting. But what I will say is going back, what I think is it's very similar to what I feel about a lot of the prequels. There are big flaws that this movie has, places where it does not work or it's trying for something very ambitious and doesn't get there. But I also feel like, along with episode 1 and episode 3, I think fans attack these movies for the wrong reasons a lot of times. I don't think that the complaints or the critiques lobbed against it are always true. Just for a quick example, a lot of people give Hayden Christensen a really rough time because Anakin is seen as whiny. which, his acting set aside, the idea that the character would have that would be somewhat immature, would struggle with this great amount of power, or would be somewhat similar to the Luke Skywalker we met in A New Hope, isn't that crazy,
Not at all. Not at all.
So I think that is representative of some of the ways I think that maybe sometimes the film is unfairly critiqued.
I get you. And in fact, Avatar, you kind of paralleled a little bit of Anakin with Luke.
That's what I've been speaking about for who knows how long. I've always felt that there's a huge parallel between them in that you see in A New Hope, Luke is talking to his aunt and uncle and he says, but I just want to go to power converters. And he gets kind of whiny. And there's definitely a familial connection there. I see the point to it. I'm still not happy with it.
I'll say this. I'll say, Hayden Christensen, about our age, Brian, at the time, I think it would be very difficult as an actor to be told, okay, act like a brat. Because he kind of had to. He, like you said, he had all those, struggles. So I just kind of feel like maybe he kind of did well at that. And maybe I'll give him that,
I think Damien, to your point as well, and I think that's something that mainstream audiences may not get, but that having worked in acting and having worked with the crew behind the scenes, especially this was his first Star Wars film, so going into work with George Lucas and George in a directorial role, not just like a writer-producer role, you can watch endless amounts of behind the scenes footage of what it was to be on the set with George and his directorial style, which admittedly, as having acted myself, is terrible.
No, it's not actor friendly.
It's not actor friendly. There are many different, as with everything in life, there are many different approaches that you can take to different things. As a director, you can be hands off, you can be hands on. And some people just don't understand what it is to be an actor, what actors need in terms of motivation. And there's a thing that a lot of actors don't like, some do, but most don't like line readings, which is like, I want you to say the line like this, verbatim, tonally, everything. And that's the kind of director George is, because he has a very specific vision of what he wants.
Right.
That's not necessarily to say that that's a good thing.
It doesn't always get the best performances.
It doesn't get the best performance. And we've seen that from behind the scenes of the original movies as well, the 4, 5, and 6, that he was much more hands off, and the actors just kind of felt, they were good actors, so they did.
Well, you can even see that with Ewan McGregor, who's a much more experienced actor than both Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen at the time, and is able to take a lot of rough dialogue and probably difficult direction or lack of direction and make it work. And the other thing that people forget, they think that a lot of people assume that the big technology jump with CGI was in episode 1. Actually, a lot of episode 1 was miniatures, and this was the big green screen or blue screen movie. And so these actors are also somewhat like pioneers. They were the first ones that were like, hey, stand in this like blue square and just imagine everything. That ball over there, that's a character. That ball's a character, and then you. That's it, And
that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard for a young actor and taking on all that stuff. And the one other thing that I will add to the awkwardness that I don't think is necessarily, I don't know how intentional it was, but the characters, when we look at them, it kind of reminds me of Finn from the sequel trilogy a little bit, where we never saw them really tap into what being a child soldier or being separated from your parents would have as a psychological effect on you, how that would be perpetuated forward. I think that George, to some degree, wanted to write these characters to be awkward and uncomfortable in these scenarios. I mean, it's a Jedi Knight who does not interact with girls that he has crushes on, does not pursue these things, and a child leader who her life has been devoted to politics 100%. She doesn't make room for things like this very often in her life. And they have a few cut scenes that you can find for Attack of the Clones that kind of flesh that out a little bit. but it still feels like that thing that George Lucas has sometimes, where he's like, he has the kernel of the idea, but the execution doesn't completely win out there. And some things like the sand scene, that gets mocked a lot, the sand being harsh. When you look at the basics, the pieces of the scene, you're like, well, it makes sense that Anakin would feel this way, living on Tatooine. It makes sense that they would have this awkwardness between them because they're flirting in a way that is almost below their age level, below their maturity level, because they don't use these tools. But the storytelling isn't put together well enough for us as an audience to come along completely for that. You almost have to make some of it up in your head for it to work.
I can see that. And we've talked about it in the last episode when we covered episode 1 that, George is a visionary. And when it comes to his vision, you try to get it out as best as you can. But when it comes to directing, that's a whole other story. You're trying to direct characters, actors. But I think you just, like you said, Barbara, just kind of like read this line, just do it. And he just needs that vision to come out. But it doesn't always come out or translate the way maybe he wanted.
So that's where I feel very unfortunate in that I already knew that so many people hated these movies before I sat down and watched them. And I didn't get to go into them with a fresh set of eyes and go, I'm just going to see what I think of these movies. I already hated them.
Yeah.
I went in going, these are bad. I'm just going to watch them and I'm going to know they're bad.
You got influenced by, the critiquing of certain geeks out there that have a problem with it. And I think at the end of the day, that does make a difference to someone brand new watching these prequel films. It's not going to be the same that it was for, say, Barbara, Brian, and I, or whoever saw it the first day of. And it's like, okay, we think of it very differently. But
I was a little young when they came out. I think I was only 1999. That was the first one, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 7.
Okay.
So I was a bit young to really understand the movies.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And especially seeing a prequel film without knowing 4, 5, and 6, I think and I said this recently with someone, I think that would translate very differently for someone than it would for people that grew up with 4, 5, and 6. And then looking back to episode 1, you're looking at it differently. You're looking at all these things that you're getting hit with that are prequelish, that you're like, this means this, that fight means that. But for someone that doesn't know 4, 5, and 6, it's like, I'm taking it for what it is.
Take, for example, Boba Fett. Anyone seeing 1, 2, and 3 has no idea who this kid is. Anyone that's seen 5 and 6, not 4, 5, and 6, but 5 and 6 goes, oh, that's Boba Fett. Personally, that's my favorite character.
I remember watching the documentary, The People versus George Lucas, which really examines like the backlash from the prequels and whether it was valid and not. And it's interesting. They have a whole section with parents, and they're talking about their children and their experience of Star Wars. And some of these children, they just grow up with, oh, there's 6 Star Wars now. Oh, there's 9 Star Wars now. It's not like there is a division. It's all Star Wars for them. Or you could come in through the Clone Wars or Rebels or some of these. They even have younger aimed series that are based through the Lego franchise and stuff like that. And so what is really interesting is you used to have like a divide. It was like, there was the original, the OG like fans, and then there was the next generation. And now we have like multiple different types of Star Wars fans who are at different ages, who have different views on the characters. And like you were saying, Damien, have different experiences. Maybe they knew, Darth Vader was Anakin always. Maybe they saw the episodes 1 through 9, or maybe they had someone who was like, no, watch these ones first. Or even for me, I know that a lot of the ability to go back to the prequels and enjoy them more is because I've become such a fan of the Clone Wars animated series, and that adds so much mythology and extra character development to those characters that when you go back to the movies, you're like, well, now I'm adding this other stuff that I have watched in this series or read here. And I guess maybe I was also primed for that as a Star Wars fan who was coming up shortly after the original film started, because there was a dead period where all you did was read novels or RPG games, right, and like sort of integrate that knowledge into the movies. You're like, oh, well, Boba Fett's thinking this is at this scene, or
exactly,
just off screen, something like this happens. And now that's become part of what Star Wars is to a degree, and it allows all these open doors for people to come in from all sorts of different directions.
It adds replay
Actually,
value, definitely.
that's actually a point that I was thinking about is what about all those kids that grew up in between trilogies and grew up watching Clone Wars on Cartoon Network? It's a completely skewed perspective. What about kids like me that read Dark Horse comics
Right.
growing up and read Boba Fett clawing out of the Sarlacc pit? It's a completely different perspective.
Right.
That's why I love Boba Fett personally so much. That's why he's my favorite character, because he's bad A. And that's my perspective. A kid that grows up with 4, 5, and 6 and then never sees anything else is just going to have that perspective.
Right. And I think that's what I was saying earlier, how kids that like you, Avatar, that started with 4, 5, and 6, maybe that will give you a little bit more forgiveness as to what happens in episodes 1, 2, and 3 when you rewatch, because even just the small facts of, okay, this kid's going to become Darth Vader. He's going to be part of the Empire that's going to face Luke and all that cool stuff that happens in 4, 5, and 6. And that's where like the Clone Wars series will kind of give that, it fills in the blanks, and then it makes you appreciate certain things that you do see that you didn't really notice in episode 2 when you rewatch it. Like, oh, this happens. I know what this is in reference of. So I think that kind of
character has a name and a history and isn't just like a figure.
Isn't just Darth Vader.
He's not Guy 2 just getting slaughtered right now. There's a reason
Jedi with weird face. Yeah, no, he has a name, and you've seen him do things in other series.
Yeah.
Barbara, I'm dying to ask you now, with Clone Wars, since that got you into it, how do you see episode 2 specifically in your opinion, looking at it now?
Honestly, and Brian and I talk about Star Wars all the time, just in daily life. So we were having this interesting conversation about it yesterday, that what's fascinating to me now as I look back at the entire saga, so 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and even the sequels, is that to me, the saga has always been Anakin's story. Even though he has such a minimal role, perhaps visually, in 7, 8, and 9, I think his legacy and what he was hoping to achieve deep down is so relevant and impactful to all of the characters in the saga, and has always been. And so I think that you really start to see that come to fruition in episode 2, because you're seeing him as a young man. You're seeing what impact the death of Qui-Gon Jinn has had, what impact the loss of his mother in the sense of being taken away from her, and then of course the eventual death of his mother. You're starting to really see the impact that these things have on him, and what that will do to him and his downfall and rise again. So I guess I find that to be most fascinating, because I think this is the film when you really start to get that.
But what is also really interesting about this film, and you sort of made me think of this, Barbara, saying that, is I feel like a lot of us would have thought that this film is going to be part of the slow downfall of Anakin. I always assumed we're going to see that over the course of 3 films, and it feels like everything with his downfall happens in the 3rd film. And it's almost like this film is teeing up things that could go either way. Like it obviously he has that incident with the Tusken Raiders, which is a real misstep. But it almost reminds me of another weird scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi is captured by Count Dooku, and Count Dooku does this weird thing that is really never explained, where he basically tells him the whole plan. He's like, hey man, what if I told you a Sith is running this whole thing? They're making up the entire war. He was responsible for episode 1. And Obi-Wan's just like, no, that's crazy. And then
James Bond was very popular at the time. They had to take a little bit from there.
Right. But what I find interesting about that is you can literally take that scene and go like, what, you can imagine what is going on, what the strategy for Count Dooku is. There's part of me that believes maybe he was trying to, that if Obi-Wan was willing to join him, that maybe he wanted to usurp Palpatine, or maybe it's a continued way to just kind of erode the Jedi's belief in the Foundation. You know, he's giving him this bit of information that he'll take back to the Jedi Council, and they'll continue to kind of live in fear and keep this secret. But the main point being, like, it's almost like when we get to Attack of the Clones, it's not a definitive yet that Anakin is going to fall, that the Republic is going to fall. There's still an opportunity for the Jedi to save things. There's still an opportunity for Obi-Wan and Anakin to connect and unite instead of going apart, or for Anakin to deal with some of his inner turmoil. And instead, we see all the wrong choices be made in Episode 3, where, again, I think I naturally assumed, as much of the audience did, that we would see this gradually. And I even remember Hayden Christensen commenting in interviews that there was some frustration because he was being told to hold back on a lot of like this the darker ways he was playing scenes, because George didn't want that yet. So it's an interesting how different George's perspective of these stories was from, I think, the popular perspective.
Well,
Right.
And I certainly don't want to monopolize the conversation. I just want to say one other brief thing. To your point, Brian, is that from a psychological perspective, if you approach the character of Anakin very much to what you were just saying, it's that as human beings, from a mental health perspective, we can be predisposed to mental health diseases or mental health conditions based on the traumas that we experience and based on other what are called risk factors that exist in our daily life, whether they be something that we are genetically predisposed to or life events that we are predisposed to. And so the same is the case if you look at Anakin's story, that, you know, he was raised by a single mother, the mother gets taken away, and then he has a father figure, that father figure is taken away, and then his actual mother is taken away. So he has these repeated things that keep happening to him that are causing further trauma and that are risk factors to be predisposed to, in this case, you know, falling, we'll just use the catch-all, falling to the dark side. But like Bryant is saying, just because individuals have these risk factors doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to go one way or another in life, or to follow a certain path, or to have specific mental health conditions. There are different things that can help them. And I think what makes the saga such a brilliant tragedy that you get to experience is you see all of these risk factors and all of these traumas that continue to add up and make complete sense as to why you end up with Darth Vader. But then you get things like the Clone Wars now, and I won't give any spoilers in case anyone is not up to date on the Clone Wars, but when you see additionally all of the things that characters like Obi-Wan and Yoda and Ahsoka could have done, but that just didn't connect and didn't happen. And so, of course, all of those risk factors and all of those traumas kept adding up, and unfortunately, they led to Darth Vader.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think a lot of these elements don't guarantee a bad outcome in a person's character by any means, but I believe in paths. So I feel like everything's a path, and you have options laid out before you, and you can really feel what your outcome will be according to what you choose. I just feel like in this story with Anakin, there was a lot of ways he could have been out of this realm of being consumed by the darkness of the dark side, but he chose to continue. He chose to do these things, and even though he had a terrible series of events that happened to him that lend the opportunity to go this way, he could have easily turned away, but he didn't. And I think he found solace with Palpatine being his father figure, and then the identity of Darth Vader being a brand new start, and it was control. It was all these things that appealed to him to feel like, finally, I have control of something in my life because everything was yanked away from me.
Well, and at that point, I think too, when we get to the point that he's in the suit and has, because I mean, he pretty much makes the choice to go to the dark side for Padme, the idea that he will some way be able to save her life. Once that is gone, once you have that scene where he is in the suit and aware that she no longer exists, I think there's also in addition to falling into the comfortability of what you're saying, all he has left is to deliver the pain he feels inside on others. That's almost the only reason he exists at that point. And it seems like they've explored it sort of interestingly in the comics, but there's an unexplored portion, I think, in the saga for a lot of people who just view the films, where you don't see the change between the Anakin at episode 3, at the end of episode 3 and the beginning of episode 4, where he has spent, a period of years just unleashing this pain and this anger on others as a way to exist, because it's all that he has left, essentially.
Right.
Well, I think that also shows that George Lucas may have actually known more of what he was doing than we originally thought.
Sure.
Maybe at least in psychology, because how many instances do you see of kids that are traumatized and then end up committing that trauma unto others for the rest of their lives?
Right. Exactly.
So I think
And it also makes you look at as you continue down the line, it makes you look at things like Empire Strikes Back differently, because sure, we all viewed it as what a huge moment for Luke Skywalker to have this revelation, to go back through the story and be like, wait, this is when Anakin is going from, I have nothing in my life, all I have is hate. Wait a minute, my son is still alive?
Yeah.
How does that change your entire perspective and make you rethink everything you're doing, and then start making you rethinking your relationship with your father figure, Palpatine, and how does that change and lead into what we see in Return of the Jedi? So
Yeah.
I think there is a lot to be mined from. Sometimes we see very minimal things on screen, but there's a lot to be mined from.
Absolutely.
they go a lot deeper than many would see.
With what you were saying, Brian, that George had a lot to hold back in episode 2. And I think that while Hayden Christensen may have been a little bit frustrated because he knew exactly where this was going and he was eager to portray it.
Sure, yeah.
It was smart, because I feel that if you would have had some of these elements come out in episode 2, episode 3 wouldn't have been as impactful, and it would have been a little redundant. Like, okay, we've already seen it. We've seen him getting darker. In this case, it was just like you said, it was the tee off. It was the setup, right for what was going to be episode 3, was just everything hitting the wall.
Well, I think that he was going for maybe the same, albeit a lot of people knew what was going to happen in the future, but I think he may have been going for the same kind of shocking revelation, but backwards, as you see in episode 6. So in episode 6, we all saw, before 1, 2, and 3, he's redeemed. In episode 3, we see, he's gone over to the dark side. It's maybe a bit of a shock factor that he was going for.
The one thing else I would add is that I think is interesting when maybe looking, for anyone who's listening, who's looking for like, where do I find this patience to revisit the prequels? How do I get back in? I think one thing we've talked about a lot is preconceived notions that people came to with the prequels because we had lived with the original trilogy for so long. And I think that was one of the biggest struggles that audiences had, was that our notion of what a Jedi is, what the Republic was, how Anakin went dark, was built up on those films as opposed to in sync with what George Lucas was thinking. And so we had to almost like fight against everything he was trying to tell us about, like what we knew about Star Wars, because we were going, no, that's not Star Wars. We know Star Wars. Right. So like an example would be like, well, we thought Obi-Wan Kenobi was the depiction of a Jedi, and we find out now through the prequels that he is very much like a reformed Jedi living in the desert. He's very different than what the Jedi were. And I think in the same way, there is something unique happening with the story of Anakin that we naturally resist as an audience, because we're told by Obi-Wan that Anakin fell the dark side because he had some sort of lust for power, that he could not resist this dark side, what it was giving him. And what we find out is that people believe that. It makes sense that Obi-Wan believes that. But what Anakin keeps to himself in episode 3 is that it's completely, like, he knows he's going to the dark side. He knows that it's the wrong thing to do. He just believes that the juice is worth the squeeze. I'm going to save my wife. This is what it takes. No one else is worth it. The Jedi Council is not worth it. The Sith aren't, whatever I have to do to keep this person with me, because I've lost my mom, I've lost Qui-Gon Jinn, I've lost all these other people,
and he can't lose her.
And I will not go on without her. And it's a further tragedy that his friends, like Obi-Wan Kenobi or Bail Organa or whoever, believe that he got a lust for power and wanted to control everything. That was a means to the end. That wasn't the purpose of it. And there is really no reason for him to share it once it's done. But it makes you look at the prequels a lot differently, because you're not seeing the story of someone who just wanted power. You're seeing someone who wanted the power to save the people he loved from dying,
Right.
and it was misunderstood by those around him.
Yeah, I was motivated by love, and that's the interesting thing about Anakin's path to redemption. That was something that while he was, I don't want to call him evil, because I feel like that led him to. It had a good intention, but it went into selfish motives, and
evil actions, clearly.
Yeah.
And
right.
that's where I have to agree with Barbara on what you were saying before about the entire saga pretty much following Anakin's storyline. You saw with Luke in all 3 of the original series how he's very single-minded. He never really changes. There's a moment maybe where you think he might go over the dark side, but he never quite does. And that's where you see Anakin having a lot more depth. Yeah, Luke is fighting for the people he loves, Leia, Han, Chewie, but he never had that same depth that Anakin did in doing what he needed, in doing what he thought he needed to be done.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what makes Anakin such a fascinating character is Darth Vader, I mean, is like iconically evil, as, pop culture sees him as this, huge, larger than life evil figure. Was he really that interesting of a character until he was redeemed? I mean, seeing this larger than life evil character then become good, I mean, holy cow, that's really impressive. But just as we were all saying a minute ago, in terms of, Anakin's path and his downfall, in the first trilogy, the prequel trilogy, you see, just as you were saying, you see him not supported. You see him not having that positive reinforcement from his friends and his chosen family. But then the first time that he gets that from his son, he is redeemed. And that's what it really takes in life, is for us as human beings to have a support system, to have positive reinforcements that allow us to be as good as we can be.
Well, and as Damien was saying earlier about it, and I guess you're speaking directly to this too, I think that what we don't always realize we can learn from Star Wars as an audience member is there is obviously a very exciting story here, a very Shakespearean story, but there's also this story about mental health and empathy, how empathy changes people, and how it changes things bigger than just, it changes personal relationships, but also changes the world. And I think it's easy to see the outside perspective from Darth Vader, but when you think about like how when he realized that he had a son still alive, that also it made him, I guess it's easy to relate in a way that like you can feel like you're dead inside, that a part of you is gone and it will never come back. And some sort of empathy or some sort of event can reopen things that you thought were never going to be reopened. Or, like basically Anakin going, oh, I thought that person was dead. I thought that life was over for me, and that ability to ever have anything good was over. And now I suddenly have to grapple with the idea of that's not over. And what does that mean? And what does that mean about me? Am I who I thought I was? And what does that mean about the actions I've taken? Right. And I just think that is such an important story. And just to put a point on it, I was watching this article or this interview recently with Sarah Silverman, the comedian, and she was talking about a friend of hers who is a former white supremacist and how he now works to get people out of these groups and to show them that they don't have to be part of these groups. And she spoke very well to how this individual talked about empathy and how empathy was what got him out. That we tend to, as individuals, go towards where the love is. And if that love is coming to you from a group, that group can be a very dark group. That can be a very dark person, like Palpatine. But if he is offering love, if he is offering acceptance, then certain people are going to go towards that because they're not getting that anywhere else.
Right, exactly.
And I don't think it's a uncomplex situation. I don't think we can just be like, oh yeah, Darth Vader was redeemed and everything was fine and the people he killed, who cares? You know, I don't think that's the situation that we're talking about. But I do think that there is a message buried in here about the power of empathy and how we can use that to make things better. That is actually the more powerful weapon than control or fear or any of these other things.
Absolutely. I totally back you 100% on that. Very well said. I have an interesting list I kind of compiled a little bit ago about interesting facts about episode 2 that I wanted to share. One of them was, according to George Lucas, this was per him saying this, that Obi-Wan's hiding in Geonosis asteroid field taught young Boba Fett a lesson that he uses to take advantage in his adulthood.
I read that one.
Having learned how Obi-Wan hid from him and his father, Boba Fett knows the trick Han Solo is hiding, using to hide in episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit. I didn't know that. It's funny because they can tie those things together. Again, appreciation when watching episode 2, another viewing. Also, of course, this one I knew already. When Anakin was slaughtering the Tusken Raiders, you can hear Qui-Gon trying to stop Anakin during the scene where he was slaughtering them, and you could see that, or hear rather, his voice trying to stop him. So that's an interesting thing. Some people may not always catch that one, but it's interesting how Anakin was so consumed that, I mean, even Qui-Gon couldn't even form, like he couldn't even be there because he was just dead set on doing what he was doing out of violence and revenge, but in spite, yeah. And so I like that the way they tied that together. And then when Jango Fett gets into his ship after his fight with Obi-Wan, he bangs his head on the partially open door, referencing the famous goof of Star Wars Episode 4, where the stormtrooper accidentally bangs his head on the door.
Apparently that's genetic.
That was just brilliant that they did that, because I mean, like, when I noticed that, it wasn't until, I don't know, sometime into the prequels, and I just never really noticed that growing up, and when I saw it was the funniest thing. But the fact that I saw that they referenced it even more lends itself to a little more comedy. But I like that when you kind of take a flaw that you did, and you kind of can make light of it, poke fun at it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that pretty much sums up episode 2 for us. I think that going forward, I can't wait to cover episode 3, which is one of my tops of the episodes. But anything coming up for you guys, Fanbase Press? How is everything going with you?
I think in terms of, sadly, in terms of conventions and interactions with folks, we really don't anticipate that returning until the earliest of fall 2021.
So they're already giving some dates now.
Well, more like implying that there won't be a possibility to open up. I mean, we think of most of the conventions that we work with will hold off until the last moment to cancel because of insurance restrictions, so they get the money back that they've put in. But the word, among the vendors is, we're most likely looking at New York Comic-Con of next year being the earliest convention that might open, and that, will probably be lightly attended, I would think.
Right.
So we'll see. It depends
very
on, how
strict
things
guidelines on attendance.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be rough. Yeah.
But we'll be doing lots of virtual stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good.
So, and all of our comics are still, of course, available for sale, and we're still shipping everything. And for those folks who prefer digital media over physical media, our entire catalog is available on Comixology as well as Hoopla. So if you have your library card you're in the US, you can go virtually to your library or in person if any libraries are open right now, and check out our entire catalog there as well.
Where can folks find you guys, Fanbase Press?
Sure, you can find us at fanbasepress.com. We're on all of the social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, everything except MySpace.
Where can folks find you, Avatal?
I'm on Instagram at AvatalStoneB. Fair warning, not a lot of stuff to see there. I'm also on Facebook Facebook, just under my name, Avatal Stone. That's about it.
Perfect. And you can find me at Instagram at Damien_DeCarlo and Making a Geek _podcast. Support your local geeks even during COVID. Fanbase Press, Avatar, it was really great seeing you guys. Stay real. I can't wait to get back together with all of you and go back to normal. Hopefully.
Likewise.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, don't forget to hit subscribe and that little bell, notification bell for more cool content. Until next time, everybody, stay calm and geek out. Good night.